And we're on the third story now. And this one is, well, this section is named They Eat Your Eyes and They Eat Your Nose. And how many stories are we dealing with in this section? We have one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 stories in this section. And it says, there are scary stories about all kinds of things. The ones told here are about a grave, a witch, a man who liked to swim, a hunting trip, and a market basket. There also was one about worms eating a corpse. Your corpse. Fantastic. Okay, so let's start the first one. And this one looks relatively small. It's the hearse song. Don't you ever laugh as the hearse goes by? For you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet, from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week. Then your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The worms play pinochle. I guess that's pinochle on your snout. Pinochle? Pinochle, I guess. Pinochle. Should I look that up? Nah. They eat your eyes. They eat your nose. They eat the jelly between your toes. Disgusting. A big green worm with rolling eyes crawls in your stomach and out of your eyes. Your stomach turns green. Wait. Your stomach turns a slimy green, and pus pours out like whipping cream. Couldn't just say whipped cream? You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's why. Wait, and that's what you eat when you are dead. Okay, whatever. That's what you eat when you're dead. So dead people eat stuff. They need nutrition and vitamins and shit when they're dead. Okay. I thought they eat people's brains, but apparently not. They eat bread. Okay, second story. The girl who stood on a grave. Some boys and girls were at a Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how this isn't a poem. Why am I trying to read it like it's one? This is a story. Shit. And they were talking about how scary it was. Don't ever stand on a grave after dark, one of the boys said. The person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under. That's not true, one of the girls said. It's just it's just superstition. I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave, said the boy. Okay, that's not enough. And I shouldn't even trust him to give me any money. Like, who is he? He's not a millionaire. His father's not a millionaire. Give me more than that. That's even disrespecting to stand on somebody else's grave, right? Okay. He says, a grave doesn't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. The boy handed her his knife. Stick this knife in one of the graves, he said. Then we'll know you were there. He's just making her mess it all up. The graveyard was filled with shadows and was quiet as death. There is nothing to be. Well, it'd be the same thing. I was about to say afraid instead of scared. There is nothing to be scared of, the girl told herself. But she was scared anyway. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then quickly she bent over and plunged the knife into the soil. She started to leave, but she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. Something has got me, she screamed. and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through her skirt and had pinned it to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. Oh, wow. She did it herself. She scared the shit out of herself. I wonder, she says she had died of fright. Did she literally die of fright, or is that like just a saying? Like she just scared herself shitless. Okay, let's see. That was the second one. And the third one is a new horse. Two farmhands shared a room. One slept at the back of the room, the other slept near the door. After a while, the one who slept near the door began to feel very tired early in the day. His friend asked what's wrong. An awful thing happens every night, he said. A witch turns me into a horse and rides me all over the countryside. Okay. I'll sleep in your bed tonight, his friend said. Okay. We'll see what happens to me. About midnight, an old woman lived nearby came into the room. She mumbled some strange words over the farmhand, and he found he couldn't move. Then she slipped a bridle on him, and he turned into a horse. The next thing he knew, she was riding him across the fields at breakneck speed, beating him to make him go even faster. Soon they came to a house where a party was going on. There was a lot of music and dancing. They were having a big time inside. She hitched him to a fence and went in. While she was gone, the farmhand rubbed against the fence until the bridle came off, and he turned back into a human being. Then he went into the house and found the witch. He spoke those strange... Oh, he's speaking strange words? Okay. He spoke those strange words over her, and with the bridle, he turned her into a horse. Okay. Then he rode her to a blacksmith and had her fitted with horseshoes. After that, he rode her to the farm where she lived. How did he know where she lived? I have a pretty good filly here, he told her husband, but I need a stronger horse. Would you like to trade? The old man looked her over, and he said he would do it. So they picked out another horse, and the farmhand rode away. Her husband led his new horse to the barn. He took off the bridle and went to hang it up, but when he came back, the new horse was gone. Instead, there stood his wife, with horseshoes nailed to her hands and feet. Oh, that is abusive. Nice. I kind of like that. That was pretty. And they have a picture here of a stupid looking horse. It's like the biggest head ever. Alligators. That's the fourth story. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well. Pretty well together. My brain just shut off after that because I know I missed the word. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he would be gone. Sometimes he would be gone all night long, and she would complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 young sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long, and the woman would stay at home all by herself After a while, she, she began to act in a strange way. At least, that is what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. So I guess this is just chock full of people turning into animals. Okay. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with the man taking his sons swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the, the young woman came running into town from a different direction. What? Different? What? That's not even different. That's direction. I got dyslexia bad, man. From the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and two little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her sons, she said, and they wanted her to live with them. But she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in the hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was a one big alligator and two small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Or is there? That was alright. I like the picture of this alligator here. That's pretty cool. And this is, I guess, the fifth story now. Room for one more. Okay. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in the big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting, but when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went into the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long, black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There is room for one more." Then he waited for a minute or two, and he drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "You were dreaming," they said. "I must have been," he said, but it didn't seem like a dream. After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia. He spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him. "There is room for one more," he said. It was the driver of the hearse. "No thanks," said Blackwell. "I'll get the next one." The doors closed, and the elevator started down. There was shrieking and screaming, then the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone aboard it was killed. Whoa. I thought when they said he was spending a day high above the city. I thought he was gonna jump off the building or something. Apparently not. That was okay. Okay, the next one is the Wendigo. I hope I like this one. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly. He agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. 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 They made. I'm so immature. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling. He heard the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were. The more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in the corner of a tent, his head buried in his arms. "What's this all about?" the hunter asked. "It's nothing," Defago said, but the wind continued to call to him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. So, suddenly he jumped to his feet and he began to run from the tent, but the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. "You can't leave me out here," the hunter shouted. Then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire." Then his voice faded and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods, down toward the lake, then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long, no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first, he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice into the sky, but that made no sense. Thunderbird. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling as it had the night before. Then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from up above, and again he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my fiery feet, my burning feet." But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that camp, leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. He went back to camp and packed. Then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since then. "Maybe it was the Wendigo," one of them said, and he laughed. "It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky, and it drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The, the hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and he asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. Damn. I expected to see a Wendigo monster being in this part of the book, but I guess not. It's alright. Okay. This one is called The Dead Man's Brains. This scary story is a scary game that people play at Halloween. What a coincidence. But it can be played whenever the spirits move you. Whenever the spirit moves you. Okay? The players sit in a circle in a darkened room and listen to a storyteller describe the rotting remains of a corpse. Each part is passed around for them to feel. In one version, a player is out if he or she screams or gasps with fright. In another version, everybody stays to the end, no matter how scared they get. Here is the story. Once in this town, there lived a man named Brown. It was years ago, on this night, that he was murdered out of spite. We have here his remains. First, let's feel his brains. A wet, squishy tomato. Now, here are his eyes, still frozen with surprise. 2 peeled grapes. Makes you not want to eat grapes anymore if you like them. And crazy thing is, I really love grapes. So I will continue to eat grapes at my own accord. Okay. Next is, this is his nose, a chicken bone. Here is his ear, a dried apricot. And here is his hand, rotting flesh and bone. A cloth or rubber glove filled with filled with mud or ice. But his hair still grows. A handful of corn silk, or wet fur or yarn. And his heart still beats now and then. A piece of raw liver. Okay. And his blood still flows. Dip your fingers in it. It's nice and warm. A bowl of I thought I was going to say cat soup. I was like, what? A bowl of catsup, because they don't spell ketchup with the K. They spell it with the C. A bowl of catsup, then with warm water. That's all there is, except for these worms. They are the ones that ate the rest of him, and had a handful of wet cooked spaghetti noodles. I didn't care for that one too much. Okay, we're on the last one. This is the last one. May I carry your basket? No. Sam Lewis spent the evening playing chess at his friend's house. It was about midnight when they finished their game. He started home. Outside it was icy cold and as quiet as the grave. As he came around a turn in the road, He was surprised to see a woman walking ahead of him. She was carrying a basket covered with a white cloth. When he caught up to her, he looked to see who it was. She was so bundled up against the cold, it was hard to see her face. "Good evening," Sam said. "What brings you out so late?" But she didn't answer. Then he said, "May I carry your basket?" She handed it to him. From under the cloth, a small voice said, "That's very nice of you." And that was followed by wild laughter. Sam was so startled that he dropped the basket and out rolled a woman's head. He looked at the head, and he stared at the woman. "It's her head," he cried, and he started to run. And the woman and her head began to chase him. What? Soon the head caught up to him. It bounded into the air and sunk its teeth into his left leg. Sam screamed with pain and ran faster, but the woman and her head stayed right behind. Soon the head leaped into the air again and bit into his other leg. Then they were gone. That was it. That was all of it. Okay. That wasn't as nice as the first two sections. But this fourth one, I think, is called Other Dangers. You probably read that tomorrow or whenever. But I'll say, out of all of these, I think my favorite one was A New Horse, because I can just visualize the woman having those horseshoes nailed into her hands and feet. That is so grotesque, and I like it. Wendigo, I was disappointed. Overall, this section isn't as strong as the first two, but it's okay. We'll be moving on to the next section in a few days, maybe tomorrow, who knows. And hopefully it's good, right? Right.